Hello, this is Monday, 11 May 2015. Welcome to episode number 49 of the Vanguard Report. Yes, this is episode number 49 and not 48 as given on the show bulletin. When you've done this as many times as we have, those episodes swim in your brain like a soup of numbers, and it's easy to lose track. My bad. So, the Vanguard Report is where we talk about all things related to the feminist problem and to the non-feminist breakout, which will ultimately cut that problem down to size, even if it never totally goes away. We non-feminist men and women are, as the late Frank Zappa would say, the other people. We are the other people. In fact, we are nothing less than the rest of the world exclusive of feminism. That's a large demographic, and it is hardly a monolith. Not demographically, not politically, not intellectually, and most of all, not morally. No guilt by association, simply by being associated with the rest of the human race outside of feminism. You follow me? We are nothing less than a microcosm of human nature. And our drive is simply to break the stranglehold which feminism currently exercises over the global mind. It is not enough merely to think outside the box, which feminism has created. We must also talk loudly, unabashedly outside of that box. And finally, to put the finishing touch upon it, we must live outside of that box. These things and more will serve as objective markers that the social death of feminism has been realized. So there you have it. We must break out of the box which feminism has shoved us into. Feminism must learn that it is not the world. Feminism must learn that it is just another ideology among ideologies. Just another Waldo among Waldos. Where is Waldo? Where is feminism? All right. I am Fiedelbogen, your host for episode number 49 of the Vanguard Report. My fellow host is Nick Redding, man of Canada, and a true son of the Alberta Prairie. Say hello, Nick.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick Redding from Men's Rights Edmonton. If you want to see our zany exploits, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is Men's Rights, one word, next to word Edmonton. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can follow us at Men's Rights Ed. If you want to see our website, and if you know anybody, or if you live in Edmonton, or if you know anybody who lives in Edmonton, who is an activated non-feminist, an uppity activated non-feminist,
a critical non-feminist, yes.
Then I suggest you contact us through the Contact Us section of the mensrightsedmonton.com website, which can be found at www.mensrightsedmonton.com. You send me an email, and I will answer it, and in all likelihood, just liberally give you my phone number. So, the men's rights movement, or the activated non-feminist movement, or whatever you want to call it, is happening in Edmonton, and it can be found through www.mensrightsedmonton.com.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Yeah, everybody, their antics are pretty zany, really pretty zany. So, next up, As you certainly probably all know, Dan Perrins, aka Danny Boy, has been going on his Hamilton to Toronto fundraising walk for men's health and welfare. A total of 75 miles from Hamilton, Ontario to Toronto, Ontario, and that's wandering about here and there to stop at various towns along the way to deliver letters to the municipal governments and to meet the public and raise the issues. Dan has completed that walk, all 75 miles of it. He has arrived at Queen's Park in Toronto. If everybody remembers Queen's Park, that's where they had a big get-together, about a year or so ago. And a bunch of protesters showed up, and it was quite a little scene. Nick was there.
That happened in 2013, in the summer of 2013.
Has it been that long? Wow.
Maybe it's my own hubris, but I like to think that was when they learned not to confront us in person anymore, because it never works out for them, and we always get a bunch of hilarious footage out of it.
I don't give them credit for being that smart. I think they need to be, metaphorically smacked over the head with a 2x4 more than once before they finally get it. That's just my opinion.
Well, to defend my case, or to state my case, that was the last time. That was the last time, aside from when I went to their meeting in 2014, when I went to the Slum Walk in 2014. That was the last time. Oh, and when Danny Boy himself showed up at the Bill Cosby show.
Okay.
But both of those, us, Men's Rights Edmonton going to the 2014 Edmonton Slum Walk, and Danny Boy and Attila Windsor showing up at the Bill Cosby comedy show there. Those were both us showing up at their events, right? They haven't shown up at our events since Queen's Park.
You don't count them showing up at events in small numbers?
Like what?
Janice Fiamengo, or was that before Queen's Park?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm completely wrong.
And didn't they show up at the cafe event as well?
I don't know about the cafe event. I know they showed up at the Janice Fiamengo event. So I was wrong. But
And then there was the Detroit event.
Well, Detroit, they held their protest long before any MRAs came down, and I think specifically because they didn't want to have a repeat of all the other times feminists and MRAs have faced off together on camera. Because you cannot find me an instance where feminists and MRAs have crossed paths on camera where the feminists came out looking like reasonable, rational people, and the MRAs came out looking like insane, racist misogynists.
Well, when you get feminists and non-feminists together, one side or the other is going to come off looking better. The other side, one side's going to come off looking better, and the other side's going to come off looking worse.
Well, I mean, point to an instance where the MRAs came off looking worse.
I don't know. If you look down over history, there's plenty of times when non-feminist people, who weren't too smart, might have come in contact with the feminists and came off looking worse. I mean, I can't generalize too much.
Well, there are non-feminists who came off looking worse, most notably Mark Lapine, but he has zero connection with the men's rights movement.
Well, he is definitely a part of the non-feminist sector. You could argue he's a part of the activated non-feminist sector, which, of course, no guilt by association for belonging to the human race.
No, but you're quite right. He is part of the activated. He was part of the activated non-feminist sector. But that, again, there's plenty of elements within the activated non-feminist sector who want nothing to do with each other, and they make that very plain.
Well, it's like the human race. There's all kinds of elements in the human race. And consider that people who are not feminist are, what, 75 or 80% of the human race, at our best estimates. And, you can't generalize about such a large demographic. That many people, they're not all good people. They're not all bad people. They're just a cross-section, just a microcosm, just a drop out of the pond of what humanity contains.
Yeah,
but above all, they're not guilty by association with each other. Otherwise, we're all guilty by being associated with the human race.
Yeah, it's like when people try to tar the atheist movement with, the fact that Pol Pot was an atheist. I mean,
Yeah, there you go. And you could go on, Stalin, et cetera, et cetera. But like I say, if you're going to call me guilty just for not being a feminist, then you're going to have to pretty much make yourself guilty for being a member of the human race, because it's just as good as saying that I'm guilty by association for being a member of the human race. Because when you talk about the part of the population which is not feminist, you're talking about such a substantial slice of the human race that you might as well be talking about humanity in general. And you just cannot morally generalize about the human race. And not to mention that guilt by association is just a fallacy anyway. I mean, intellectually respectable people don't play that game. Anyhow, boy, let's get back to Danny. He arrived at Queen's Park. He had delivered a letter to the Ontario legislature. The Ontario Legislative Building is right next to the park there, as I understand. Now, this is where Dan Perrins pulls a surprise move. Dan has commenced a hunger strike. That means he's not eating. He has had delivered his letter to the Ontario legislature with certain demands listed in it, and he will continue his hunger strike until those demands have been met. He will spend his days sitting on the front steps of the legislative building and spend his nights sleeping rough in Queen's Park, right next to that building. And yes, the hunger strike. So, to give you a little bit closer look at this, I'm going to read you an article, a short one, from AVFM. Dan Perrins begins hunger strike at Queen's Park Legislative Assembly. Go there, you can watch the video that's there as well. Dan Perrins has just completed a 75-mile walk from Hamilton, Ontario to Toronto in order to draw attention to two major men's mental health issues. The first is male suicide, which claims the life of 8 Canadian men a day. This is an issue that has directly affected Dan. Today is the anniversary of his brother's death by suicide. The other issue is that of Canada's governmental indifference to men who are experiencing abuse in intimate relationships. Earl Silverman tried for years to fight that fight with the Canadian government, with efforts to establish a funded shelter for male victims of DV. The government's reaction was silence. The reaction of the already established feminist-based DV service industry in Canada was to mock and ridicule Mr. Silverman. His fight ended with his own suicide 2 years ago. Dan has already delivered his demands at the footsteps of the Queen's Park Legislative Assembly, who at first refused to even accept his demands for review. After some discussion, they reversed and accepted the documents. Dan has vowed that he will remain on hunger strike at the Assembly building, sleeping in the park across the street, and spending daytime hours in the protest area in front of the building until he gets a commitment in writing by the government to take action on his demands. I will be interviewing Dan this evening and placing that interview in this article unedited once that is done. I have instructed AVFM editorial staff that this notice will remain in the top featured spot on this website till this is over. I also encourage all MHRAs, especially those in the Toronto area, to contact local media and advise them that there is a hunger strike underway at their legislative assembly. It is up to us to support Dan Perrins in any way possible. After walking 75 miles to bring attention to the issues we most care about, he did the unimaginable. He did not seek rest and comfort, but instead moved directly toward a hunger strike and sleeping in the rough. AVFM will be tweeting this article every 8 hours with updates, because every 8 hours Ontario loses another son, brother, father, or husband, while the Canadian government busies itself with any way it can to ignore the problem. More to come. And you can read that article at Q number 1 on your Q list. You want to read more about it, I recommend the article on the Honey Badger website. That would be Q number 2. Now, I would like to let Dan speak in his own words here. I'm going to share with you Dan's statement, his letter that he delivered to the Ontario legislature. I'm going to read it to you in its entirety. Verbatim. Here we go. A letter to the Honourable Premier Wynne and Ontario Government on Men's Mental Health Week. To the Most Honourable Premier Kathleen Wynne and the Honourable Members of the Legislature, my name is Dan Perrins, and I have just finished a 75-mile journey from Dundas, Ontario, to Toronto to raise awareness for men's mental health. I'm sure you're well aware that the Canadian Mental Health Association has declared this week National Mental Health Week and has set the focus this year on men's mental health. This is, to my knowledge, a first for Canada, setting the example for the world. We're calling on the government to do 2 things. Number 1, establish shelters for male victims of abuse and domestic violence. There are currently none. Number 2, Section 300 of the Criminal Code of Canada be upheld. Those who libel and slander individuals and organizations advocating for the human rights of men and services for those in need must be held to account. I come carrying the voices of my community of Dundas, Ontario, and all the cities and boroughs I walked through to get here: Burlington, Oakville, Port Credit, Mississauga, and Toronto. I come carrying the voice of my brother, Anthony Perrins, who committed suicide 33 years ago to this day at the Hamilton Mental Hospital, as well as Earl Silverman, who hung himself on April 26, 2013. Earl's suicide was a direct result of him being forced to close an abused men's shelter due to lack of government funding. Honourable Premier Wynne and honourable members of the legislature, we are currently failing our fathers, our sons, our brothers, our uncles, our cousins, our colleagues, our friends. Multiple levels of government, from municipal to federal, are abandoning half of humanity by neglecting their overall health and well-being. Today is the anniversary of my brother's death, and I've just completed a 75-mile walk to get there with my dog, Jeb. I'm asking I be granted special privilege to address the legislature, or a written guarantee this will occur in the immediate future. If I am not granted this privilege, I invoke my rights under Section 2 of the Charter. My chosen form of protest is a hunger strike. I do not take this stand lightly. I take it knowing that if something isn't done immediately, there will be 3 more male suicides in Ontario and 8 more across Canada today, tomorrow, and every day. Most Honourable Premier Wynne and honourable members of the legislature, I implore you, please put an end to this inexcusable and shameful dereliction of duties and give hope to those who are suffering. Premier Wynne, each one of those men has a family, a community, and we are failing them as well. bringing shame to our great nation. Arresting me will only change the venue of my hunger strike, for I will continue it in jail. Premier Wynne, I have written and called politicians, and it always fell on deaf ears, and it has only gotten worse in the 5 years since I was told I was a lesser human being for being male. When serious domestic abuse was committed against me in early February 2009, I was told by police services to suck it up, as they did not intend to enforce the law. My complaint regarding that officer was met with depraved indifference. So I'm here today with two simple requests that would make a difference to prevent unnecessary death and preserve life. Number one, establish shelters for male victims of abuse and domestic violence. There are currently none. Number two, Section 300 of the Criminal Code of Canada be upheld. Those who libel and slander individuals and organizations advocating for the human rights of men and services for those in need must be held to account. And mocking and dismissing those who strive to help boys and men succeed only in keeping victims from getting help. Dan Perrins, May 8th, 2015. All right, that was Dan's statement to the Ontario Legislature. In addition, Dan left the following comment on AVFM, that article that I read before. Dan says, there has been some confusion here, understandable all things considered. The terms to end my hunger strike are as follows. 1. Full funding for men's DV shelters. 2. That those who libel non-feminists be brought before a court of competent jurisdiction. I've already handed in a complaint about Sharp Men's Mag libeling me, stating I put Big Red's personal information out there in my article about her. These are the only two demands. Well, our thoughts are with Dan, and here's hoping that the project is brought to a speedy and successful conclusion. Anybody who wants to help with this, go back to cue number 1, retweet that article. If you're on Twitter, retweet that article every 8 hours, 3 times a day, or maybe more than that, I don't know. But keep retweeting it and retweeting it and retweeting it. Put it out on Facebook, put it out on any other kind of social media you've got, spread it by email, whatever you've got, whatever works for you, get it out there. I also highly recommend you do a bit of research and look up the names of journalists and the addresses of radio, television stations, and journals, online journals and publications, and so on. Various media outlets, many of which have a Twitter account. So you can get their at so-and-so Twitter account. And when you're tweeting stuff, or retweeting stuff rather, include some of those and make sure that this gets out to as many journalists and news outlets and media outlets as possible. Just a flood. And I know from experience that this kind of activism can be effective. It makes an impression. It makes a splash. But you got to do it, and you got to do it a lot, and then you got to get people to, behind you. You got to build up an army of people doing this. But that is what I recommend you doing. Get it out to members of the media and retweet it constantly. And on that note, let's move along to the next segment of the program. I want to share a little item with you here. This unfortunately is not online. I have this now in the form of a PDF file. This was a scan of an old publication. This is from May 22nd, 1991. Wow, that's a long time ago. That is what? 24 years ago, almost a quarter of a century now. So we're diving back into the vaults of history. This is from the Daily Princetonian. Daily Princetonian is the student newspaper for Princeton University in New Jersey. And the reason we're digging into the vaults of history here is because we like to counteract the feminist memory hole effect. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You'll find this interesting. Headline, front page of the Daily Princetonian for May 22nd, 1991. Incident prompts debate on how to relate survivor stories. Here we go. The revelation that a female undergraduate falsely accused a fellow student of sexual assault, doesn't say rape, it just says sexual assault, okay, has raised questions of how to most effectively speak out against sexual violence on campus. Like you touch somebody. Is that sexual violence? I don't know. While administrators have suggested that the use of an open mic format for the annual Take Back the Night March could encourage survivors to make hasty decisions, march organizers assert that this feature is central to affirming women's experiences. How familiar the rhetoric sounds. This is from a quarter of a century ago, and it sounds like it's from 2 weeks ago. It's like old bathwater cycling through the tap over and over and over again. It's like time standing still. It's like a bad dream where you're hacking your way through a thicket of bushes and you never go anywhere. You're just hacking at the same bushes all the time, and you're stuck in that thicket of bushes forever. Those involved in preventing sexual assault and harassment, moreover, have emphasized that the same environment which allows for this type of violence to occur could encourage members of the campus community to now question the validity of survivors' stories. Ho, ho, ho. Listen and believe, anybody? Listen and believe. This stuff never changes. They're still doing it. 25 years from now, what's going to be happening? Yes, Nick.
They keep on doing it because it remains so effective. Even, I'm guessing, even in the face of small oppositional forces that have propped up in the past. Because
well, there were. I know there were oppositional forces cropping up in the past. There was oppositional forces cropping up long before I was part of those forces. I didn't become part of those forces until, the early post-Y2K years. So I'm sort of an old-timer in this, but I'm not an old-timer by any stretch.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was having my wake-up calls back in 1993, so...
Well, I had my wake-up calls even before Y2K, but it didn't really crystallize for me totally until about maybe, well, I know 2000, Y2K, the year 2000 itself was the year when I definitely, when the beat clicked over for me. But I didn't really start to gather critical momentum until, I would say, about 2003.
Yeah, for me it was about 2009. But what you're pointing out here is the consistency in their dogma, how it's lasted for, what, 50 years now?
Well, if we're going to date this from the publication of The Feminine Mystique, which is sort of traditional, that's 1963, so it's been just a little over 50 years, yeah.
How does this keep on working generation after generation? First of all, because they keep on quelling any dissent.
Yes, that's part of it.
Really, what this reflects to me, is they've got a strategy. Feminists have a strategy and it has proven unbeatable for 50 years.
And we're still analyzing it and still trying to get to the bottom of it.
And because it's worked for 50 years, and I mean, like, worked like magic, quite literally.
Nick, would you like me to boil it down into a simple phrase?
Well,
it's because they're taking advantage of people's good nature.
Yeah. They did. And that is a con that can go on.
Which is a common tactic for bullies.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I remember when I got robbed on the street one time, or they tried to rob me. I headbutted one of them in the face. But a couple of guys, like even after, like they could see me coming down the street, and I could see them like nodding to each other and like, yeah, this is the guy we're gonna get. And then they charged at me, and I just stood my ground, and I headbutted one of them in the face. And after that, they were like, "Oh my God, why did you hit one of us? We just wanted to shake your hand. That's all it was." You know.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, yeah, and it is that psychological tactic that, like, how dare you defend yourself? We just wanted.
We're the victim now. We wanted to victimize you, but you stood up for yourself. And now we're the victims.
It's more like we just wanted to do something normal, and you, the freak, stood in our way. You know, defending yourself and all that.
Well, Nick, I'm going to guess that at that point when you headbutted the person, they had not yet quite laid hands on you.
No, they had not.
Okay, so there was that ambiguity. They hadn't actually done anything yet. You knew damn well they were gonna, and you knew you had to act quick.
Well, they ran at me, and when people run right at you,
it's a pretty good sign that they have, malign intentions.
Yeah, in the middle of the night when there's no one watching, and all you have to do is put your head about an inch forward, and that hurts them.
Well, the point is, you knew where it was at. They knew where it was at, but nobody was around. So I guess nothing really came of that episode.
But again, it comes down to the aggressor, and this is something that Tara Pomoltier points. No, not Darbo. When she talks about borderline personality disorder, she talks about people who they do not recognize their own abusive behavior as abusive, but any defense against that abusive behavior is seen as abusive immediately.
Yeah, there is a whole spectrum of psychopathology at work within the feminist community. It has disproportionately attracted some very, very, very dysfunctional personalities. And it's become a refuge for scoundrels of every kind.
And in a society such as ours, we've conditioned men, and to an extent, I think this is healthy. And I think it's so healthy we should be extending it to women. We've conditioned people to put up with aches and pains, and to shut up and not complain. And again, to an extent, I think that's healthy.
A little bit of stoicism can be very healthy.
But once you've got that ingrained into a person, and you aggress upon them,
you take advantage of their good nature.
You take advantage of the stoicism that's been ingrained in them.
Which I would count as an aspect of their good nature in this case.
Yeah, and
their better nature, their philosophical nature.
And the weakness of the person in this case is thinking that the other person actually means well. Do you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean. I do see what you mean. You don't want to think that the other person doesn't mean well.
Assuming that the other person is as well-meaning as you are.
And you don't know because these people are good at disguising their motives.
And they are so acquainted with your willingness to give someone the benefit of the doubt even after they've physically hit you, even after they've harmed you, somehow, the moment you start standing up for yourself, they will clamp down on that as abuse against them, and they know that you will start to wonder: have I actually harmed them?
You will start to waver in your convictions, yes.
Am I actually a bully who is just pushing them around? The thing is, I mean, if you're willing to ask that question, chances are you're not a bully.
Chances are you're not.
um,
Well, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled, I mean, you've heard this one before, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing us that he doesn't exist.
yeah.
And I don't say that as a religious man, I'm not, but I think we can all, read devil as meaning force of complete evil or complete amorality or sociopathy.
Or just the dark side of human nature.
The dark side of human nature, yeah, that all factors in. The dark side of human nature, but that there are people out there in the world who do not mean well. It's not a misunderstanding. They're just either out to get you or they're out to run you over and not care that you're there.
Yeah, and often, these people have no other they have no other skill beyond their natural ability, which is far advanced beyond the rest of us.
It's considerable. It's considerable, especially they start out with that ability, and then they do some time in prison, and they really put a sharp edge on it.
Well, I've met these people pre-prison, and there's no way to.
You wait till they get out. You wait till they get out of prison. Let me tell you.
Yeah, but the takeaway lesson in all of this is to spend a lot of time making damn sure that you are right in what you do, because when people cross your boundaries, you have to put them down. I mean, depending on the situation, you may have to punch them in the face. You may have to simply out-argue them. You may have
to verbally bitch slap them.
You may have to put them on the ground, and you may have to take a bullet to them. I mean, depending on the extremity of the situation.
Now, of course, we do not endorse or recommend violence, folks. In case anybody's listening.
Well, I do, but I don't recommend or endorse violence against someone just for speaking their mind. What I mean is there's a spectrum of appropriate use of force. And,
okay, that's a good way of putting it.
And these people will always they are very skilled at convincing you that the appropriate they appear nowhere on that schedule. It is never appropriate to use any kind of force against them, be it rhetorical force or physical force.
Okay. Well, one of the distinctive features of this present period of history is the rise of the victim mentality, the idea of victims and perpetrators, the idea of victim groups and perpetrator groups. Everybody nowadays wants to get a slice of that victim pie. And, that's what you got to do these days. To get any kind of moral high ground, you got to play the victim. You got to either, you could be a genuine victim or you could just play the victim.
Yeah.
And some people are very good at playing the victim.
Well, and
feminist chief among them.
You've got cases like Malala Yousafzai, who actually did catch a bullet in the head. But on the other hand, I mean, she recovered from it, thankfully. Now she's using the fact that she got hit in a specific conflict in the disingenuous way that we're talking about now, where a person plays up their victim. I don't mean to take away from the genuine atrocity of a young woman being shot. But when you've got someone who actually has got a reason to consider themselves a victim, you combine it with a victimhood mentality. That's a dangerous that's a dangerous cocktail, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and you can scratch Anita Sarkeesian off that list when she fabricated the Kevin Dobson episode. Anyway, enough about Anita Sarkeesian. Let's get on with this article. I don't know if I can finish all of it. See how much of it we can read here. It's long. In the incident which has raised these concerns, Mindy Brickman, 91, recanted much of her experience about sexual assault in a letter appearing in today's issue of the Daily Princetonian. Brickman spoke in Henry Arch during this year's march about her experience, shortly after which she submitted a letter to the Prince repeating her story. The Dean of Students' Office responded to her allegations made her allegations made during the march by printing a letter which stated that many of her facts, including her allegations regarding the office, were incorrect. In today's letter, Brickman apologizes for her inaccuracies. Organizers expressed concern that some individuals might use this incident as an excuse to dismiss the problem of sexual harassment and assault. You know something? The more those kinds of incidents pile up and the more common they become, the more frequent they become, the more I think people will use such incidents dismissively. And I would add with some justification. When we see just how frequent these things are, what a pattern there is to it, how they happen again and again and again, almost in a carbon copy way, we are fully justified in developing a tough and cynical and skeptical attitude. That's only right. Okay, folks, remember once again, this is 1991 when this happened. Blame victim. It could serve to vindicate certain people who are threatened by women empowering themselves. Nick, are you threatened by women empowering themselves?
No, not at all. In fact, I would call it thrilling. In many cases, sexually arousing, and generally, I generally have a good opinion towards women empowering themselves.
Okay, well, I guess we all have our take on that. My take would be more philosophical. It's empowering something. Why does anybody need to be empowered? Why does anybody deserve to be empowered? Who needs power? Why do you need power? Why do I need power? Why does anybody need power? Just to say we need to empower somebody but not ask the philosophical questions is, in my opinion, a grave mistake.
Well,
and yet we're not encouraged to think about these questions.
What you're right, and I can tell you right now. Why does anybody need to be empowered? Why is power a good thing? Because
it's better than being powerless. I mean, being powerless sucks.
Yeah, without it, you can be pushed around by any whim of anybody who does have power. And I can tell you from experience, the same experience.
Just ask Poland, that was stuck between Russia and Prussia and Austria during the late 1700s, what it's like to not have power. You stop resisting.
Well, yeah. What's it like to be powerless in a world where other entities have power?
You get run over. You get run over. That's what happens.
Yeah.
So we all need power. Well, what we need is, in the end, is a balance of power. And unfortunately, in this world, that balance of power is never truly balanced. I don't think there's any freedom from strife and conflict, this side of nirvana or some stage of higher evolution. But let's not get philosophical here.
Well,
That's, yeah, go ahead.
when you're discussing the nature of power, it's hard not to get philosophical because any slight flex, any slight
Well, I guess what I meant to say was metaphysical rather than philosophical.
yeah. Well, yeah. In any case, yeah. An individual accruing power, I think, is always it's always a good thing. It's just a question of how they use it.
Yeah, bearing in mind that power corrupts, and I do believe that power corrupts.
I also believe that power corrupts, but that brings us back to your talking about the balance of power.
Exactly. I don't think there is, well, I would wrap this all up by saying I don't think there is any stable resting point. There is no utopia. I mean, I've said that before, and I think, Nick, you and I agree on this, that utopia is a delusionary rainbow.
It's nowhere. Literally.
It's nowhere. Literally nowhere, as the Greek word says, utopia, nowhere. And trying to chase it is no better than chasing a rainbow. And not only that, it could be, well, it can get you in trouble.
And so when we
Serious trouble.
When we talk about gaining power, we don't talk about gaining power over all there is. We talk about power over a very limited spectrum, and hoping that other people also choose to empower themselves to dominate their own little sphere.
But not yours.
Yeah, and you know those two things are naturally going to come in conflict.
Well, getting back to feminism, which is what we mainly talk about here, as we know, feminism is the project to increase the power of women with no clearly stated upper limit or endpoint. That in that way, feminism is an evil thing and a corrupt thing, because there's just no limit to power for women as far as feminism is concerned. And power corrupts, and so in the end, feminism, I should say, feminist power, or feminism in general, can only corrupt women. And not only women, but pretty much everything else it touches. Let's see. It could serve to vindicate certain people who are threatened by women empowering themselves and find ways to blame the victim again, said Women's Center participant Alice Dwyer, 92. Yes, they had women's centers back in 1991. I would hope that people would see it as a minority event, which will lead not to distrust of the march, too late, but increased participation in the planning of the march. Interim Share Director Joyce Clark said, I believe that as a community we've come a long way in learning to believe survivors, listen and believe, to believe survivors, and in giving them the respect they deserve. I hope that we continue to move forward on these issues and not retreat or regress. Women's Center participant Gitanjali Maharaj, 92, pointed out that listeners at the march should focus their attention on the concerns of rape survivors rather than analyzing the details of their experiences. Yeah, that's more that more shades of listen and believe. You know, just don't analyze the details. Just listen and believe, and get the feel of the narrative there. You know, just trust your feelings.
Yeah, and that is a very important thing. Don't think about it. Don't question. Just go along with the emotions that we are giving you now.
Okay, that's right. We know those people are guilty over there. All right? We know that person is a victim. Even before we've looked at the evidence, we know that person over there is a victim.
Yeah, that is a fact. You have to believe it, and if anything leads you not to believe it, that is a deception from the enemy. You know
That's the patriarchy. That's the patriarchy.
You know it characteristically by its disagreement with our narrative.
There is no way we can ensure that everything we hear is truth. a moment of truth there. There is no way we can ensure that everything we hear is truth, but we need to listen, not to find the truth in the stories, but for what kinds of needs these people have, and what we can do to help. And that's a hard sentence to figure out there. Take preventative measures. While several administrators agree that this incident should not be used to treat the issue of sexual violence with less concern, they said the university should consider taking steps to prevent false allegations in the future. What kind of steps could the university take to prevent false allegations? I'm having a hard time with that one.
To prevent false allegations.
You got any ideas about that, Nick? It seems to me that the burden of preventing false allegations falls upon the false alligators.
Yeah.
Good pun there, false alligators.
Those making the false allegations. Don't lie. Yeah. So why is the responsibility on the institution instead of the people making the false allegations?
If we were to teach men not to rape, but how about we teach women not to lie? Oh, that's right. I forgot. Women don't lie. Okay, yeah. So that's what feminism teaches us. Women don't lie.
You know, just taking everything out of a gendered concept for a second here. I mean, imagine any other system that told you that certain people don't lie and you should just believe it. Just believe them. I mean, this is a problem that really does not have to do with gender. It has to do with bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to do with empowering half the human race or the other half under the bus.
Yeah, empowering half the human race to do pretty damn near anything they want with no moral accountability. And that is the logical endpoint toward which feminism naturally develops, which is, I think, the main reason why feminism is evil. It just has no moral accountability. It does not demand moral accountability of women, and it simply does not in itself possess moral accountability. It is amoral at best and at times downright immoral. I think it comes back to what you always like to say, Nick, that these people are willful and conscious liars.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of them are immoral, a lot of them are amoral.
But, yeah.
I'm still leaning toward the thought that maybe half of them are willful, conscious liars, and the other half are just useful idiots.
Well, you know what? If that's true, then as this goes on, then more and more of them will be liberated from their state of deception. Right?
Of useful idiocy, liberated from the state of useful idiocy, but in which direction? In the feminist direction or in the non-feminist direction?
Well, if they are liberated from feminism, it's assumed that they would go in the non-feminist direction.
But if they're liberated into the higher ranks of feminism, into the ranks of the willful unconscious liars, that's the other direction in which their liberation could occur. To get them out of the useful idiot category.
I don't see them as liberated because they're still imprisoned by the same lies.
Well, I'm using liberated in a rather liberal sense there. I mean, they're liberated from the category of being useful idiots. They know that they're liars now, and I guess that's a more empowered position to be in than to be a useful idiot who is deluded.
Well, you know, you say now, but I mean, I've talked to people on the bottom.
And I'm sorry, I admit I'm being a tad cynical here.
Yeah. No, I've talked to people. I've talked to neophytes, to feminist neophytes. I talk to them all the time, either in real life or online. And yeah, a lot of them are really, really, really stupid. In fact, I would say somewhere around the 100th percentile. 100th percentile. They are really, really dumb.
I grant you a lot of them are stupid.
But
I would say they are asleep in some way. Not that their brains are inherently defective, but it's due to some purely psychological defect.
and in a lot of cases, they're just like any other religion, right? Like they can turn the most perfect rational gaze on any ideology other than their own, right? But when it comes to the precepts
of their cult, yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to challenging those precepts, then they, at the drop of a hat, become mentally handicapped. And I don't mean that. I mean that literally. They are mentally handicapped.
I've seen it, Nick. I've seen it.
I
have parted company with some very dear and close friends. Years ago, when I first began to express my awakening doubts about feminism. And you would not believe the reaction I got from them. I mean, these were good people, good friends, people that I felt close to, and then suddenly overnight everything changed.
Yeah, and that's a very common reaction. It's almost like you can watch 50 IQ points fleeing from their head. Like it's almost
just dropped 50 IQ points like they dropped a lead weight out of a second-story window.
Yeah, it's almost like the change in overall personality is shocking.
It is shocking.
Like people all of a sudden become much stupider than they are.
Which leads me to speculate about the nature of intelligence. It's not all just in the organic capacity of your brain. I'm sure that plays a part. But stupidity is largely a matter of wearing blinders or blocking your faculties of reason in some way.
I've had it explained to me that stupidity is an attitude, and I think that's the best way to.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. An attitude.
Feminists. I mean, you've got people who are willingly operating way beneath their operating capacity to maintain a lie.
Well, they have to do that because if all of their channels were open and they were aware of everything, which a normally functioning intelligence would do, then they would not be able to sustain the false belief. It is purely to sustain the false belief that they have to bottle up those 50 IQ points. They have to make themselves stupid in order to not see what they are perfectly capable of seeing.
Yeah.
And they need a Socrates to come in there and tweak their memory and make them remember what they already damn well know. Anyway.
Go ahead.
Oh, is there something more you wanted to add, Nick?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, people have to feel free to find strength to find healing, and while it's never easy to get at truth, the truth is what we have to get, said Dean of Students Eugene Lowe, 71. It may be useful to think about the way the Take Back the Night March works. An open microphone can be abused. Yeah. Speech that is made might not always be accountable. Yeah. Lowe added. There is something which happens in that dynamic which is not controllable. People's confusions cannot be checked by reality counseling. Clark added that from a clinical perspective, the open mic format might not serve survivors' best interest. We're seeing a glimmering of introspection by these people. Let's see how long they keep it up. My concern is that the pull of the moment may not create the kind of situation where people can make the best long-term decisions for themselves, she said. Great risks. Assistant to the President Karl Wartenberg said, I don't know if the open mic is helpful or necessary. It might be empowering to some, but the risks are so great that it may not be healthy. Well, yeah, anybody can stand up in front of that open mic and say anything they want. But we are to listen and believe, I suppose.
Yeah, well, talking about an open mic as risky, I mean, again, back in 2014 or 2013 in Queens Park, we had an open mic, and we had a guy show up who started talking about the French and the Indians and how we had to start picking up guns. And after he brought up the word guns, he was immediately shooed away from the mic. So it is legitimate to bar certain people from a microphone, I think.
Well, open mic is, bound to attract certain people. You're giving them a platform. They can get up there in front of a public and say whatever they want. They can promote their agenda, whatever that is. Open mic is a powerful temptation, and it's a natural funnel. It's gonna bring certain things to a point. It's going to concentrate certain things unnaturally. The decision to speak publicly before a microphone must be viewed in the context of a culture. Continued on page 8. Ooh, I got a lot of scrolling to do here. And my PDF reader is still loading the page. The question is, do I sit here and wait for it to load? Or do I say, oh, to hell with it, let's go on with the next thing in the program? I don't know.
While you wait, we can talk more about freedom of speech.
Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. Page 8 finally loaded in my PDF reader. And the remainder of the article is pretty short. Rape accusation triggers debate. Continued from page 1. Which has inhibited women from speaking out against sexual harassment and assault, said March organizer Emmy Chang, 93. There are all kinds of societal pressures that make sexual assault stigmatized, and that so often silence survivors, Chang said. All kinds of emotions are involved when a survivor tells her story. They may not be able to tell the whole story because the details are too painful, and everything they might say is influenced by the way in which they think people might perceive them. Alternative formats. Administrators suggested that a better format might include small group discussions in lighted rooms with counselors present. In this setting, they said, trained individuals could help survivors cope with their emotions and still receive the affirmation they need. Survivors sometimes regret their immediate decision to speak at the march and suffer painful psychological consequences later, administrators said. Student organizers of the march, however, disagreed strongly with any proposals to eliminate the present structure of the march. The march in its present format has a lot of power with the whole community there. Yeah, the public square effect? Chang said, I don't think you can duplicate that in small groups. They do understand the public square effect here. Tara Crean, 93, said, the open mic is an extremely important medium. If there was some kind of screening, people would be less likely to speak, and the whole purpose is to let people come forward who have been silenced. Have been silenced. What does it mean to say somebody has been silenced? Somebody stuff a gag in their mouth, or what?
It could mean what the men's rights movement is facing right now, where anything that makes us look good is subject to media blackout.
Right, media blackout, or conspiracy of silence, just ignoring it. March organizers emphasized that instead of questioning survivors, community members should question the environment which perpetuates sexual violence. That's the end of the article. I like the way that article ends. Community members should question the environment which perpetuates sexual violence. They end the article by begging the question. They just assume, they simply assume that we live in an environment which perpetuates sexual violence. That's precisely the question that is up for discussion. It's not a settled question. It's not something everybody has agreed upon. It is very much an open question whether we do in fact live in an environment which perpetuates sexual violence. A lot of people would not agree with that. But here they simply state this just bluntly as if it were a fact, when it is actually a fact, not in evidence. It's a thing very much in dispute. Anyway, that's the end of this article from the Daily Princetonian, the newspaper of Princeton University, from May 22nd, 1991. It was a nice little trip in the time machine there. It just shows you how little things have changed over the last quarter century. It just goes on and on and on. Apparently, you know, sexual violence and rape have not gotten any better. You know, I mean, to hear them talk than it was in 1991, and certainly their rhetoric has not changed. And it's like they've got their hands on some kind of a hand mill, and they're just cranking it out and cranking it out and cranking it out like this mechanical process. That's all it is a mechanical process. And they're reeling out this kind of rhetoric like a bunch of flesh robots. It's sad to look at. It really is.
And they don't know how to deal with disagreement.
They don't.
It's like that one episode of South Park that John the Other used to reference. You are not of Landru. You are not of the body. There was an episode of South Park, Star Trek rather, where people went down to a planet's surface, and if everybody was very friendly until it became clear that you did not know who Landru was. And Landru was the computer god. The computer god that was running the civilization. And go ahead.
Oh, I don't know who Landru is. Sorry.
The reason that John the Other would bring this up is because it's such an accurate comparison that you've got people who are very civil. They're perfectly willing to carry on a conversation with you, but when you don't recognize their God, when you
go outside of their narrative, as we say,
then they realize that you are an outsider, and they're not just suspicious of you. It doesn't just end at suspicion.
They want to destroy you. They really do.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're afraid.
The more power these people get, the more dangerous they're going to get. It's not too much of a stretch to compare them to Nazis.
Or any other Nazis or any other.
Or badass Bolsheviks or what have you.
Any other instance in history where
Torquemada, yeah, the Inquisition,
where people have decided that the presumption
they decided that they are the way, the truth, and the light.
Yeah. When they
and you're not.
The presumption of innocence isn't good enough, right?
Well,
when you can point to a specific population, be they Christians or women or whatever.
Jews.
Well, you're talking about when I mentioned Christians and women, I was talking about the group that is able to point to someone else.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah,
and just because of their moral superiority, their presumed moral superiority,
You know, they are the ruling class. I guess what is really distinctive of our present age of history is that you have a group of self-identified victims who are in the position of being the ruling class. And that's not a very good position in which to be a victim. I mean, to be a victim and be a member of the ruling class, I mean, those two things just don't jive with each other at all. And yet they're getting away with it, which is really ironic as hell.
And I mean, Vernaculus points this out, but you can even see on my channel. I mean, back last year when they had Professor Janice, not Professor Janice, sorry, when they had Staff Sergeant Shauna Grimes up on stage with, who
was
else?
it? Lise Gattel, was it?
Yeah, it was Lise Gattel. But you had representatives of the police, the media, education, police, media, and education, all up on the same stage.
And they are all part of the establishment.
And they're all part of the establishment. And they're all talking about rape culture. They are clearly, like, it's obvious.
Pardon me, rape culture is the establishment narrative.
Yeah. And
the establishment does whatever will keep it in power. And rape narrative, or rape culture, or the rape culture narrative is what keeps the present establishment in power. Truth be damned.
Yeah. And what happened here in Edmonton when you had Staff Sergeant Shauna Grimes and Lise Gattel and Ryan Jesperson, who is a media personality. So you had academia, police, and media all together on one stage talking about rape culture.
They're telling all of us peons that rape culture is reality, and we better believe it.
But the fact that you've got these people in positions of authority all united in their cause in front of everybody makes it hard to believe that they are the underdog, which is exactly how they try to present themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, they are very much promoting a victim narrative or a victim-based narrative, and yet they are the establishment. So there is a tension there. There is a contradiction there inherently. Anyway, that was our trip down the time tunnel to May 22nd, 1991. Let's move right along. We got some more things lined up for the episode. Go to cue number 2. This is just a little quick thing here. This is something I found on Twitter. You go there, you click on that thing, and you'll see a JPEG, I think, or JPEG or some other kind of graphic up there on Twitter. A meme posted by some feminist. And I'm going to read it to you. Why the word feminist? Why not just say you are a believer in human rights or something like that? Okay, this is a common question that people like us ask a lot, and this is a feminist who purports to give an answer. And this is interesting because it's pretty typical of the answer that you'll get to this question. Because that would be dishonest. Feminism is, of course, part of human rights in general, but to choose to use the vague expression human rights is to deny the specific and particular problem of gender. It would be a way of pretending that it was not women who have for centuries been excluded. It would be a way of denying that the problem of gender targets women, that the problem was not about being human, but specifically about being a female human. For centuries, the world divided human beings into two groups and then proceeded to exclude and oppress one group. It is only fair that the solution to the problem acknowledge that. That was the feminist reply. And I think, most of us basically would say, something along that line. Why the word feminist? I mean, you could say feminist. Why not say masculist? And this is the standard, pretty much boilerplate feminist answer, and it's pretty thoroughly stated. And I don't know, Nick, can you see anything wrong, just right off the block, anything wrong with that feminist answer that's just been given here?
That when they say that talking about humanism applies to all humans, and that's somehow wrong.
No.
Are you asking me to find the problem with that?
Well, actually, it goes a little bit further than that. I just thought you might have a take on that. But it goes a little bit further than that. She basically says it would be a way of pretending that it was not women who have for centuries been excluded. Basically, this whole answer begs the question. It's a circular argument where the circle is compressed to a single geometrical point. And they are just flat out stating the premise of feminism, that women are oppressed. And it completely shuts down the conversation or the entire question, are women oppressed? Have women been oppressed? Is this really true? It just simply assumes the truth of feminism as part of the answer and goes from there and cuts the entire argument out of the loop.
Yeah, and that's
what's wrong with it.
That is what they do. They always bring up the concept of female oppression as though it just is. Like it's just like gravity. Women just are oppressed. And anybody contradicting that hates women.
Doesn't believe in Landrew?
Yeah. Doesn't believe in Landrew. Anybody who doesn't believe in that is they are not of the body. They are not of Landrew.
And they're fair game for the most part. They're fair game.
Yeah.
Lie about those people, get them fired from their job, dox them on the internet, send bomb threats and death threats to them, whatever you want to do, slander them in a newspaper article.
It's like, I mean, oh my God, I can't.
This is just more proof of why feminism hates the world, the rest of the world, the part of the world that's not feminist.
Yeah, like the notion that women were not oppressed is treated in the same regard. It's like you're saying it's okay to smash open a 5-year-old kid's head and eat their brains. Well, it's not like saying that. I think that is a false equivalence. No,
I really do.
I don't, and I'm willing to defend it. Because
I think that comparing that, denying that women are oppressed with smashing a 5-year-old kid's brains out, that's a false equivalence.
Well, on a moral sense, it's not, because when I tell people that women have never been oppressed, that women have never been an oppressed group, I get looked at like I just said, hey, let's go smash a 5-year-old kid.
Exactly, and I'm saying that what you did and the way they're looking at you, those two things are wildly out of proportion with each other.
Oh, yes, you're right.
yes, that's what I meant.
So harm children, that's not the same thing as have never been an oppressed group.
But this is how people who are in the feminist cult, they hate the rest of the world. They want to crush the rest of the world. Anybody who's outside of their cult, but basically they want to expand the perimeter of their cult until it finally embraces the entire world and everybody in it, and until everybody is part of the feminist cult. At which point, fast forwarding to the probable future here, you would end up in a collapse. You would end up in a total implosion and a human disaster, and then feminism would be gone. But the question is, can we get to that point before we get to that point?
The thing is, even if we like that is a question for some science fiction writer. if and when feminism wins, and they finally. Here's the thing: feminism is not meant to win.
It's meant to keep moving and meant to keep taking and keep devouring the world around it.
Well,
and when it runs out of stuff to devour, that's it for feminism.
Well, it's meant to exist in the presence of winners.
In the presence of winners.
Right. It is by nature a parasitic.
It is parasitical. It is aggressive. It is a colonizing force, I would say.
So as long as
it's an assimilating force like the Borg.
As long as there's somebody succeeding, then they are doing so.
Namely themselves.
They are doing so in defiance of feminism.
Oh.
So feminism has to come along and tell them what to do.
Well, in that sense, as long as there are winners external to feminism, then there is an external enemy for feminism to attack and thereby validate its own continued existence. But once all those external enemies are gone, if feminism has no more worlds to conquer, and that would be the end of feminism. Feminism would implode, and reality would come back. But the problem I see is that the longer we postpone this, the more disastrous the final inevitable day of reckoning is going to be, and that's what concerns me.
Well, what are you afraid of?
Well, I'm afraid of what's going to happen when feminism finally collapses, when the delusion cannot be maintained any longer.
Well, just legions of young men who have no idea where to go, and legions of
everything, all the wreckage and damage has been done to the world, and suddenly it all collapses. Well, there's going to be some turbulence and chaos, and then things will settle out into something like normality, not utopia, but something like normality. But the point I would make is that let's get this shit settled sooner rather than later. The more we postpone things, when the big collapse finally comes, the more explosive and disastrous it's going to be ultimately.
Yeah. Yes, we have to stick up for the truth and establish what is true before.
Exactly. Let's get this sorted out sooner rather than later. And right now, let's move along. In the episode, that was just a short little interlude. That was cue number 3 that we just got through looking at. Let's move right along. We all know that feminism is a hate movement. More to the point, we all know that feminism is an anti-male hate movement, that it's built upon a foundation of bottomless animosity toward men and all things male. But there is another side to feminist hate, one that most people aren't much aware of, but which needs to be taken into very careful consideration. Feminism doesn't just hate men and stop there. Feminism goes further and hates everything which is not feminist. In other words, everything which does not support the feminist project and fuel its continual growth. And putting it simply, feminism hates the rest of the world, the part which is not feminist, or worst of all, the part which cannot be turned into an extension of feminism in one way or another. That is the home truth about feminism. It hates the world beyond itself. It thinks it is the world, and when it confronts the world beyond itself, it is at the same time confronted with the thought that feminism, is not the world. And that's a pretty hard thought for feminism to digest. Now, it's also a truth that feminism would rather keep under wraps as much as possible. The fact that feminism hates the world. After all, it doesn't sound very nice, does it? Now, feminists would not want to admit that feminism hates the world, and would not do feminism any good collectively in its public relations to go about declaring that it hates the rest of the world. That's something that needs to be kept on the down low. So our central task, us critical non-feminists, men and women alike, is to force feminism's hate. Feminism's hate into the open where it can be plainly seen. Forced into the open. You got to squeeze it like squeezing toothpaste out of a tube.
Oh, no. That is where I disagree with you.
You don't want to force feminism's hate out into the open where we can all see it? Well, let's hear about your disagreement.
You don't have to force it. You can simply encourage it.
That's another way of saying force it, encourage it, whatever, by whatever combination of methods, make it come out. I mean, maybe force wasn't the best choice of words there, but
yeah. Just give it an opportunity.
Well,
really,
I would say give it a little kick or give it a little jab, or at least give it a little good, strong but steady pressure.
Well, like back in
and be there to capture it when it happens. Be there to gather the evidence when it happens.
Well, back in 2013, we showed up to the slut walk with signs that said "I love sluts." There's no way you can derive a hateful message out of that without being completely insane.
So what you did there is you forced the hate to the surface. I mean, that was force that you used. Even if it didn't seem very forceful to you, even if it seemed gentle and passive, I mean, it was a kind of force, Nick. It was.
We attracted. I mean, well, okay, you're right. It's a kind of force because we knew that when we did what we did, they would have only one reaction, and that constitutes force. You
pressed their buttons. You knew what button to press, and you knew that by pressing that button, you would force a certain reaction out of them.
If they had they been more sophisticated, then what we did would not have elicited the reaction from them that we knew would come.
Well, if they'd been more sophisticated, they would have just looked the other way, pretended not to see you. They would have just cruised right by you.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
But of course, if they had done that, that would have given you an advantage, a different kind of advantage, but it would have given you an advantage. Either way, there was no good move they could have made in that particular scenario. If they reacted the way they did, well, that was a bad move for them. If they had simply ignored you and just walked on by you, that's a bad move for them in the long run, because that means they have withdrawn and granted you a space to exist in the world, and them giving you more territory, meaning that you have gained ground, and you can now operate more freely. So, they were damned, this way and that way. But our central task, anyway, is to force feminism's hate into the open where it can be plainly seen. Not just feminism's hatred of men, but feminism's hatred of anything or everything which is not feminist. Very important distinction there. Feminism hates men, but feminism hates anything which is not feminist, because, of course, what is not feminist is not hateful of men, and comes immediately into conflict with feminism and clashes with feminism's plans. We love it when a bigot like Gloria Allred says, if you're not a feminist, you're a bigot. And we would love it even more if thousands of... Uh-oh. Fortunately, I have a landscaper working just outside of my house, and they're making some noise. Nick, can you hear that?
Yeah, everybody can hear.
That's too bad.
Just like they can hear the dog picking up and dropping the bowl in my living room. This is... Anyway,
the landscaper with his power tool is gone. He was there for about half a minute, now he's gone. So I guess we're okay, we can carry on with the show.
Yes.
So, we love it when a bigot like Gloria Allred says, if you're not a feminist, you're a bigot. And we would love it even more if thousands of Gloria Allreds were popping up everywhere and saying equally bigoted things. So our mission is to force their hand. Force them to show their cards. That's our mission. In concept, it's very simple. Force their hand. Make that hate come out into the open where everybody in the world can see it, and the nature of feminism becomes obvious to just about everybody, to a critical number of people, and then we can begin to turn the game around and turn the tables on them. That's our mission, to force their hand. So, you may ask, how do you do that? Well, simple. You make conspicuously visible to all concerned that the non-feminist part of the world is something, as opposed to nothing. The reality of non-feminism as a factor in the equations of occurrence is very simply political. And properly understood, it is a reality that is deadly to feminism. To understand this, it helps to understand the nature of feminism. We say that feminism's being consists of its being in motion. That means no motion, no feminism. A tornado, a hurricane, a whirlwind literally is motion. It's air moving. That's all it is. It's just motion. Stop the motion and there is no thing. And that's a very good analogy. Feminism, the being of feminism, consists of its being in motion. Always doing things, always changing things. Feminism must remain in motion if it is to continue existing at all. Motion in this case means extension of feminism into more and more institutions and cultural spaces. Yeah, it's that long march through the institutions thing that we've heard about before. It's that colonization of human communities thing that we've heard about. The minute feminism stops moving, it starts dying, because it starts unraveling and shrinking. Feminism thrives only on a continual diet of cultural conquest and expansion. In practice, this means building a fabric of lies based on a foundation of earlier lies, forming a new foundation for continued lies in the future. Yes, there is reason. There is a reason why stage one in the feminist, non-feminist cooperation spiral is feminists lie. Here is another cue. I think this is cue number 3. I hope that's the right cue number. This is a link to the feminist, non-feminist cooperation spiral infographic. If you haven't seen it, you need to go and look at it. You need to see it. It's a masterpiece. And we're lucky to have our Danish graphic designer to put that together for us. A tip of the hat to him. Feminism can survive only by piling one lie on top of another lie. That's the only way feminism can survive, by piling one lie on top of another lie. The minute the lying stops, the truth process begins. Critical thinking rushes in to fill the vacuum when the lying stops. When the truth process begins, the entire structure of built-up lies from the past progressively disintegrates by reason of exposure to the disinfecting sunlight of the world's gaze. Feminism must remain in motion. It can be either expanding or shrinking, but either way, it must remain in motion. If it stops moving, then poof, it stops existing. If feminism stops expanding, it can only start shrinking. That's all it can do. And the reason it starts shrinking is because the truth process springs to life and commences to eating it alive, eventually eating it down to the core of its original lie, and after that down to nothing. So, when we expose the core fact that feminism hates the world, not just men, but the world, then we immediately set a wall in the path of feminism's expansion. We deprive it very dramatically of moral justification, which is its fuel. This blocks it from further growth. Being blocked from further growth, it can only do one thing, and that is shrink. Feminism hates the world. You, me, everybody who's not feminist. Everything that is not feminist. It hates everything which is not feminism, or everything which will not be or cannot be converted to feminism. Oh, they'll try to convert you to feminism, and if you're not reasonable and you refuse to be converted, then they're out to get you. Feminism inherently cannot tolerate the existence of anything which is not feminism. Or to state that more clearly, feminism inherently cannot coexist with anything that is not feminism. It cannot acknowledge any duty to coexist with anything that is not feminist, because that would establish the fact that there is a world beyond feminism. This would be deadly to feminism, not only because it would set a roadblock in the path of feminist expansion, but because it would establish the simple, elemental fact that feminism is not the world and will never become the world. And for feminism, that would be the end. That's all I got to say about that today. I think it's about time to wind the episode down here pretty quick. Nick, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, start looking up if you have any interest in Gamergate. Start Googling for any Gamergate meetings in your area, because they are popping up all over the fucking place.
All over the place, man. That's right.
Uh,
Every wide spot in the road with the gas station and a bar is having a Gamergate meeting these days.
Yeah, the cities that I know of are Victoria, or rather not Victoria, Vancouver, British Columbia, Seattle, Washington already had theirs.
Boston.
Boston is a big one.
And some other city in Canada. I forget which one.
I don't know about Canada, but I know that Phoenix, there's going to be one in Phoenix.
Sandusky, Ohio, I think.
Yeah. If you can't find a meetup, start one. That's pretty much what I had to say about Gamergate. If you can't find a Gamergate meetup in your area, start one.
We encourage the spread of the Gamergate movement. I am not a computer gamer. Nick, I believe, plays computer games here and there. I don't know, Nick, do you consider yourself a gamer per se?
Yes, I do.
You do? Okay. As opposed to a person who just enjoys playing a good computer game now and again.
I'll tell you, my parents introduced me to all kinds of sports and martial arts and hiking and all kinds of stuff, and I did not enjoy any of them. Video games.
You didn't enjoy hiking, Nick? Good heavens.
Well,
go on.
I did enjoy hiking. I'm sorry, but you can sit a kid down in front of a video game, and you won't have to tell them to engage in it week after week. They will do it themselves because video games are fun. I'm sorry. I'm
Nothing like virtual reality when the actual reality sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, I have owned one of the systems I've owned: the original Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the N64, the Xbox, and the Xbox 360. Oh, and the Virtual Boy and the Game Boy. So I think at this point I qualify as a gamer.
I played Pac-Man in a bar in Yakima, Washington, maybe 3 or 4 times.
You're not a gamer, faggot.
That is the limit of my experience with computer games. That, and I think there was a little computer game called something like Bug Kingdom that came on a Macintosh that I had once, and I played with that a few times too. Other than that, that's it. That's where I draw the line in computer gaming for me.
Yeah.
Haven't gone any further than that. So no, I'm safe to say I'm not a gamer. And yet, despite the fact that I am not a gamer, I'm not a computer gamer, I have been following the Gamergate thing with interest, and I've been studying it more and more, gradually acquainting myself with it more and more, because it is relevant to the politics that I'm involved in.
As a non-gamer, why do you find this so interesting? I mean,
well, I was about to touch upon that a little bit.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, right? I mean, there's all these facets of society that are non-feminist and that are activated non-feminist, but for some reason, the video game, the video gaming faction of society has shown more balls than the NFL and the NHL combined.
Yes, the initiative.
Well, not just the initiative, but like, here's the thing. Like, I've thought about this for a long time. Like,
well, the thing is, they've got a ready-made thing to organize around, which a lot of other people don't.
Yeah.
And that is their world of computer gaming. They've got a community, a network already in place. They've got the structure on which to build activism. When the occasion for activism finally came along, they had, if you will, the machinery already in place. All they had to do was hit the on switch.
Yeah, they did have the machinery in place, but
the social infrastructure, you would call it.
Yeah, that exactly was there, but finding one of them to actually take the mantle, oh my God, that's the most difficult part.
Well, they needed a spark to the powder keg, and that spark arrived in the form of Anita Sarkeesian and in the form of August 28th.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Where those 10 articles, I mean, you know what I'm talking about, Nick, those 10 articles that arrived like, 10 mortar shells, one on top of another.
And it was
so clearly planned.
Yeah, and it was all done.
And it stank to the high heavens.
And it was all done to stop any kind of discussion on a particular topic.
It was made to put the peasants in their place.
Yeah.
And it failed. The peasants got really, really, really uppity. And the thing blew up in their face, and then the lords are cowering in their castle, and they've drawn up the bridge around the moat. And oh yes, while the Jacquerie is rioting outside. So yeah, this whole Gamergate thing is fascinating, and even as a non-gamer, I cannot help but be somewhat drawn in sympathetically to that vortex. Because, I mean, we have a common enemy, and that is feminism / authoritarian leftism, otherwise known as the social justice warriors. And it's getting harder and harder to separate feminists from social justice warriors, because they're so much part and parcel of each other. I mean, there is a kind of difference, but it's just hard to know exactly how to parse out that difference.
I'll tell you right now, social justice warriors are ostensibly concerned with other quote unquote injustices, whereas feminists are primarily concerned with quote unquote injustices affecting feminists.
Well, or purportedly affecting women. But I'm going to disagree with you a bit there, Nick. I mean, I've talked to so many feminists who say that feminists are worried about injustice to everyone. Feminists want equality to everyone. I mean, feminists are big time, at least a lot of them are, big time into intersectionality theory. And again, it becomes harder to draw the line between the feminists and the social justice warriors.
Yeah, but you remember as well as I do that Huffington Post's video interview where there were feminists calling themselves gamergaters who were imploring people not to confuse them with social justice warriors. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that, and this again is what makes the whole thing so fascinating, because it's complicated. This adds new layers of complication, and as I believe I've said elsewhere, to my mind, you know, the analogy here is to a couple of rooms next to each other in a house where you go in and you knock out the wall between the two rooms, and suddenly they're open to each other and they become one world.
Yeah.
And then the furniture and the pictures and all the other objects in the room begin swapping back and forth with each other, and you have a big, larger combined universe, and it changes reality for both of the rooms. And this is what's happened. I mean, we who are fighting feminism have just found ourselves open up to a much larger cultural universe. And you know what? I find that exhilarating. I feel my brain expanding, you know, trying to take in all this new information and this new cultural perspective. But it's empowering. It's part of going ambient, I think. Wouldn't you say so, Nick?
I would. Going ambient to me means people of any ideology or any lack of ideology opposing feminism.
Well, joining the activated non-feminist sphere.
And even gamergaters.
That sphere keeps getting bigger, yeah.
Even most gamergaters will tell you that they're not against feminism. They're just against the authoritarianism.
Exactly, and so are, you know, as are we. But this is where I think we have an edge, Nick. I mean, we have not yet. I mean, we have learned to see all feminism as the problem, you know, as being corrupt right down to its very root. Whereas there's still a lot of people that think there's a good feminism and then there's a not good feminism, and you can somehow separate the two.
Yeah, and we're seeing now if you're an MRA or any other kind of activated non-feminist, and you're dealing with gamergaters, you'll see that they're saying things like, "Oh well, there's extremist feminists and extremist MRAs," and yeah, there are extremist MRAs, but they don't ever do anything like what extremist feminists do.
They don't, and what's really funny here is that some of these people are, you know, they're still using the term MRA, you know, not realizing that term has just mushroomed to the point where it's becoming more and more meaningless.
Yeah, agreed. As an MRA, I agree with you.
You can call yourself an MRA if you want. You know, I'm not an MRA. I'm just a straight up, you know, straight from the bottle. You know, take it neat anti-feminist, which of course makes me a non-feminist as well. Obviously, I mean, how can you be an anti-feminist and yet be a feminist? Of course, you're a non-feminist.
Indeed. Well,
so yeah, go ahead.
Well, with me, you know, the whole anti-feminist and non-feminist and MRA thing. I want to make it very clear, if I haven't made it clear before now, I joined up with the men's rights movement because I am an anti-feminist, and the men's rights movement was the largest anti-feminist movement that I could join. That said, I have done activism in the name of men's rights. Therefore, I am a men's rights activist.
Technically, objectively speaking, yes.
Yeah. And
would you say that this activism of yours was for the purpose was primarily for the purpose of undermining or dismantling feminism, damaging feminism?
Yes.
Now there's the critical thing. If what you're doing is, if the topmost thing in your mind is to damage feminism, and something else, and something I haven't talked about much yet, but something what I call the androcentric narrative voice, meaning I'm speaking as a man, and here is what feminism is doing to men. I have totally rejected speaking in that voice. You know, I am objective. I'm just from this standpoint of being on a mountaintop and saying, here, look at feminism. Look at what feminism is doing to the world. Look at what feminism is doing to everybody. And oh yes, that includes what it's doing to men. That's not the androcentric narrative voice. Agreed
completely. And that's what Christina Hoff Sommers recently said in an interview with who's that Stand By Your Manhood guy?
I don't remember that. That's not a title I find all that attractive, but
Peter Lloyd.
Okay.
And sorry, hiccups. What Christina Hoff Sommers said in that interview was, I don't think of myself as standing up for men. I think of myself as standing up for the truth. And right now we are drowning in our untruths about gender.
Well, that's well said. She's a good unicorn feminist.
Indeed, and I think that sums up my stance particularly well. I'm not in this for men. I'm in this for the truth.
Well, that sounds like something I could sign off on very readily. Well, it looks like we're coming doggone close to the 2-hour brick wall of death here. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I think we need to start winding it down. Boy, I never thought we would fill 2 hours, but it looks like we just about did. Everybody, as I promised last week, I have included a link to the strict anti-feminist manifesto. And which link was it anyway? One of these links, was it link number 4?
I can't tell you.
No, I know you can't tell me. That's okay, Nick. I should have had my act together a little bit better here. I'm going to have to look at the browser here a minute and tell you. But anyway, we've got our link to the strict anti-feminist manifesto. It's there. It's on my blog, Counterfeminist 2. And we'll click on the Vanguard Report link here at AVFM, and we'll go down to the link list. Here we go. This is Q number 5. Glad we got that sorted out. This is Q number 5 on your link list. This will take you to the SAF manifesto. SAF means strict anti-feminist. Have a look at that. You might find it enjoyable. This lays out the main points of, well, strict anti-feminism as opposed to men's rights. It's there. Q number 5. And I think it's time for us to wind it down to a close now. We got about maybe 6 minutes left. You can get a hold of us at our email address, which is vanguardreport@usa.com. Anything that's on your mind, send it along. That's our email, the Vanguard Report at USA.com. So, this has been episode number 49. I see on, where is it? On AVFM, the show bulletin has been updated, and it says episode number 49 instead of episode number 48. Well, that's good. Somebody went in there and fixed it. Whoever it was, I thank you. So, this has been episode number 49 of the Vanguard Report. And I'm going to leave you with the same thing I leave you with every week. Remember, never forget, feminism is, and I mean that, feminism categorically is what we say it is. They don't get to tell us what feminism is anymore. They're the ones who don't know what feminism is. And it's our job to tell them what feminism is. Well, no, it's not our job to do that. It's our job to tell everybody else what feminism is. And they can listen or not listen. They're going to get swept off the road of history. Feminism is what we say it is. We are not feminist, and we have a say in defining feminism because, like it or not, we're stuck living in the same world with feminism. And we need to talk about what feminism does and how it impacts upon our world. So, feminism is what we say it is. And on that, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you again next Monday for episode number 50. That's a landmark. Episode number 50 of the Vanguard Report coming up next week. And until then, everybody, be excellent to each other. And ciao. Talk to you later.